Hello, and welcome to Spirit of Life. I'm your host, Benjamin IQ Sanders, for today, and we've got someone so wonderful to have in the studio. Please welcome the Reverend Colin Hunter of Brunswick Baptist Church. How are you doing, Colin?
Good to be here.
Oh, thanks for coming. We've met on several occasions just in the community in Melbourne, but this is a slightly different meeting for us to be on film. Your journey of both faith and of, I guess, a residence is an interesting one. And if you don't mind sharing with the people who are in the audience today, where are you from? Because I see you eyeing my tie, so it's kind of giving me...
That's a good clue. I was born in Scotland. I was actually a wartime baby.
Okay.
So I go back a long way. And I came from the city of Dundee. And that's where my life journey and I guess my spiritual journey began.
Now, when most people hear of Scotland, the first thing they think of, unfortunately, or probably not unfortunately, it's a good thing, it's a beautiful sound sometimes, bagpipes.
Yeah, yes, it's not a beautiful sound for me. I enjoy bagpipes, but no, they're not for me the archetypical sound of Scotland.
So what is?
They say of bagpipes that they should be heard over the hills and far away. It's the best place to hear them, yeah.
Well, the place I hear them the most in Melbourne actually is the bridge going over close to the, I think the National Gallery Victoria.
Yes,
yeah,
yes, and it's lovely to hear them there. But no, that's not my memory of the sounds of Scotland.
What would that memory, I guess as a sound, what has been the most sacred sound to you that you associate with your faith and spiritual journey? I
think there are two sounds. One is the sound of the pipe organ. I grew up in the Church of Scotland, and of course their church was a very serious business, and I have the most wonderful memories, particularly of Christmas, when the service at Christmas time was full of wonderful music, and the service was aimed towards people of my age and stage.
Okay.
And so I remember very much the sounds of the pipe organ, but also the sound of the cello.
Wow.
I was very privileged in probably grade 2 or 3 to be selected out of the class to be given half an hour tuition on cello every day by a very fine music teacher. So for me the sounds of Scotland are the sounds of the pipe organ and the cello. They are the ones that stir my heart most profoundly.
Now, do you still have an affinity for cello now, or you
yes,
play?
I still play very amateurishly, but I love the cello, and it's yes.
Now, speaking of pipe organs, as I understand it, as I believe you're not the senior pastor at Brunswick, you are the pastoral team coordinator. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We have we have 4. Active pastoral team members at the moment. We have one who's on leave of absence and another one who is a pastoral team member without portfolio. But yes, I kind of hold that together and work with these wonderful people.
With those wonderful people, what have you found to be the most, I guess, theologically refreshing aspect of working in a team as a pastoral coordinator?
The whole experience for me is very life-giving, because not just the pastoral team members, but the whole congregation at Brunswick Baptist Church is really focused far more on the relationships and the community than on dogma or doctrine. And so I find that we're very open to very different ways of seeing the world. We have a positive policy of inclusiveness. So that inclusiveness reaches out to children, even the little babes in arms.
Running around?
Yes, they can run around, they make noise. Children are so important for us. It means that we reach out to refugees and asylum seekers and migrants And of course, coming from Scotland, I have a very strong affinity with people who find the experience of migration quite intimidating, at times even alienating.
If I'm correct, you have a very interesting makeup in terms of percentages at Brunswick, of course.
Yes. Most of the churches, even in Brunswick and other inner city areas, are predominantly Anglo-Saxon origin, or at least European. At Brunswick, we estimate that we have at most 50% European or European origin, and we would have at least 50, and I would think more like 60% non-English speaking background, many from Asia, many from the subcontinent, India, Sri Lanka, Africa.
Okay.
So our
So
inclusiveness is particularly reaching out to people who otherwise feel marginalised, and that also includes the gay community. We have gay people within our church who know that they have a welcome at Brunswick Baptist Church, and so that's part of our ethos that makes us, I guess, a small community, but a very interesting, fascinating community.
And from the sounds of it, a very active one as well. We're going to pause for a moment to go to commercial, but we'll be right back, and I'd love to keep talking about or hear more about some of the unique mix that is at your church, Brunswick Baptist. You're watching Spirit of Life, and we'll see you in just a moment. Hello and welcome back to Spirit of Life. Today in the studios, Reverend Cullen Hunter from Brunswick Baptist Church. Welcome again, Cullen.
Thank you.
In the first segment, we talked a bit about the immigration and migrant experience, and you mentioned the word marginalized. One of the things, I guess, in communities of faith is that they often deal with, if not personally, a community and people that might be marginalized. For you, have you found it to be quite different, you not having a Scottish accent, you coming from Scotland, and what's that experience been like for you, and how has it helped you understand others who are coming to Australia?
The reason I don't have a Scottish accent is that I actually worked very hard to develop an Australian accent.
Wow.
One thing that I've learned is that I have an ear for languages.
Okay.
Not just understanding how languages operate, but understanding the sounds of languages. And as I say, I worked very hard in the early days to fit in because I felt so different.
Oh.
Now, at the time I was 10 years old when I came to Australia. And of course the other children, the other boys particularly in my class, made life at times a bit miserable for me. Not necessarily bullying, but yeah, there was a bit of that, but more laughing at my accent. And so, as I say, I worked very hard at getting rid of my Scottish accent, and I think I managed to do it quite effectively. I did have a photograph of my early days. It was the end of the first year of primary school. And the photograph is a typical primary school grade end of year photograph. All the children lined up in rows.
Hair combed.
Hair combed, jackets, ties on.
Oh.
And here I see myself and I only noticed this years later, decades later, that I am on the end of the row and I'm standing away from the group. And the photograph actually led me back into what it feels like as an immigrant. The only obvious difference with me was an accent. But I feel so strongly for people who come with a different accent, with clearly a different ethnic origin, a different culture, and the desire to fit in is very strong. For me, it became possible, and therefore my Scottishness became invisible. It's not possible for most of our migrants, and certainly not for our refugees and asylum seekers. And it hurts me very deeply when I see the way in which refugees and asylum seekers become, as it were, a political football.
For you, would you say that there is one, or is there one particular passage of Scripture that you think speaks potentially with your faith toward that process of welcoming, I guess, people to the table as they are?
Yes. For me, there are many passages of Scripture in the Old Testament, particularly in the books of Moses, but also in the Psalms, and again in the prophets. In Isaiah, you have this constant theme to care for the widows and the orphans and the foreigners, the aliens, those who come from another place, who have no indigenous right within the community to welcome them. So those passages, which culminate in Jesus' manifesto in Luke chapter 4, where he's talking about how the Spirit of the Lord is upon him to give sight to the blind, to release to the captives, to proclaim good news to the poor. These passages for me are absolutely focal to my understanding of what it should mean to be the people of God. And it also takes me back, Benjamin, to the situation of the indigenous people of this land of ours, who, through absolutely no initiative of their own, find themselves now to be strangers in their own land. Their traditional sacred places, their hunting grounds, taken from them as a migrant to this country who enjoys the wonderful benefits of our country. It fills me with a deep sense of shame and guilt that our indigenous people are treated so abominably.
Well, I'd love to hear, just really quickly, your thoughts on the idea of Abraham as a refugee. I mean, it seems that
Absolutely.
in reading biblical text, there's this repeated
Yes.
going and being the stranger
Yes.
and having to learn from it.
Yes.
What lessons,
Yes.
just really quickly, do you think we could learn in our faith journeys looking at others in the community?
That's a wonderful question, because it takes us right back to the roots of the Judeo-Christian religions. And I guess what I learned from the Abraham story is the way in which it is constantly repeated, brought back to memory through all of the feasts. My father was a wandering Aramean, as one of the most ancient texts in the Hebrew Bible. And to keep reminding themselves, they are to remind themselves where they have come from and who they have been. And so, for me, those of us who are, in a sense, boat people — I was literally a boat person, I came on a ship — those of us who are boat people, and that is virtually all of the non-Indigenous community, need to keep reminding ourselves where we have come from what we have experienced, not in a way that makes us feel sorry about ourselves, but in a way that helps us to have profound empathy with the refugees, but also with the indigenous people.
I want to keep talking about that more, but we have to take a small break for commercial. We'll be right back with more Spirit of Life. Hello, and welcome back to Spirit of Life. Today we have Reverend Colin Hunter from Brunswick Baptist Church. Welcome again, Colin.
Thank you.
148 years is a long, long time. And you've gotten to be around the community in Brunswick during some very, very interesting periods. Obviously, you just mentioned we are all boat people and that there's a very diverse community at Brunswick. Where do you see, or what do you think Brunswick as a church will be in the community over perhaps the next 140, 150 years?
Well, we're actually going through a period of fairly major change. Our buildings are 148-year-old buildings.
The heritage listed.
Will fall down if we don't do some major work soon. The bricks are saturated, rising damp, piano was rained on last Sunday. So we're faced with trying to bring the buildings up to a standard that will keep the church buildings going for the next 50 years. But we want to ensure that the buildings somehow reflect the values, the ethos, the theological emphasis of the church.
Now that seems to be a welcoming ethos, just from what you've told me.
Yeah.
How do you incorporate so many different influences and have them meld together seamlessly, as it were?
Well, we have a wonderful architect, and that's a great help. But we're looking at the ways in which spaces are used at the moment.
Okay.
The church, as it is at the present time, is set up as an auditorium. Sloping floor, focus on the pulpit, the old high pulpit, which was 6 feet above contradiction.
So you look to the hills.
Yes.
Gotcha.
No, you look at the word, the preacher, and I don't want to denigrate that, but it is not part of our central focus now. Preaching has moved. I think there is far more of an emphasis now on teaching, bringing us back to the essence of what the Bible has to say about what it means to be created in the image of God, not just as an individual, but as a community. And so we want our buildings to allow our church community to be able to speak to the wider community of Brunswick about what we believe is the good news of Jesus. Good news which I know is evident in many other faith traditions in other ways. But we hold very strongly that the proclamation of the word about the good news to captives, to the sick, to the blind, to the widows and the orphans, to the foreigners, to the indigenous people of our country. We feel that our buildings must allow us to proclaim that message not only in words from the pulpit, but in the way that we live in offering hospitality and welcome to the wider community. We want people walking past to look at this place and say, oh, I'd love to see what's inside there, and I'd like to meet the people there because they seem so friendly.
So it does feel like a welcome
Exactly.
table. Well, which is interesting because looking at the Bible, you often see so many things take place around meals, if I'm correct.
Absolutely.
And at one time, didn't Brunswick have a soup night?
It did.
Okay.
Yes, that was one of its really terrific programs that it ran probably 10 years ago
Okay.
and more. And many people in Brunswick came to see that as part of their social environment, and it was wonderful. The reason that it stopped was that people simply ran out of energy. It's a very high maintenance task running an evening like that, and so finally, yes, we had to.
Now, before we leave, on a personal note, I've heard a rumor that your wife makes jams to die for,
To die for.
to live for. Is there any meal for you that you would like served in your, or that you serve in your heart to people that you think makes them feel welcome? And if you could give in a verse what it would be, what would that be for you?
For me, the whole imagery of food and spirituality is about, in a sense, creating not just the food itself, not just the meal, but the table that is hospitable, that becomes the sacrament. So in other words, communion for me is not just about a loaf of bread and a little glass of grape juice, which is what we do. We don't use fermented wine. The sacrament for me is about when people sit down at the table, they feel that a meal, whether it's a roast lamb or whatever, has been created with love, and is the host or hostess's gift to them. And that allows a meeting of hearts in a way that I think almost no other activity does. So hospitality within our redeveloped church is going to be so important. We're planning to have a kitchen to die for.
Well, we'll be looking forward to it. You've been such a fantastic guest, and hopefully we can have you back maybe even next week. You've been watching Spirit of Life. We've had Reverend Colin Hunter from Brunswick Baptist Church. My name is Benjamin Sanders, and if you'd like more information, please look at the website, and we'll see you again next week.